Hey guys, Brian here with Steadfast Truth and Grace. And I'm doing my first of what I hope to be many videos in the future as a book review of a book I just completed recently. And it was not what I expected. All right, so the book is Drownproof by Andy Stump. Not the leadership book that I expected, and that is a good thing. All right, Brian Weaver here with Steadfast Truth and Grace. Again, this is one of what I hope to be many videos in the future. I am a ferocious reader. I love constantly reading through, especially leadership books. I find them helpful for me as a pastor, as a leader of a staff, and just in my life in general as a disciple of Jesus. And because this Steadfast Truth and Grace is based on faith in Christ and living as his disciple. I'll give you the caveat that Drownproof by Andy Stump is not a Christian book. To my knowledge and from what I've been able to research, I don't know that Andy is a Christian or expresses himself as a Christian, but there is still a lot of good that can be taken from his book and a lot of principles that we can learn and utilize in our life as disciples of Jesus. In the future, the books that I review some will be expressly Christian, some will not be, and we'll kind of talk through some of those points as well. But again, this is a book review on Drownproof by Andy Stump. So I thought it fitting that I use my Black Rifle coffee mug, which is a veteran-owned coffee company started with Andy Stump and his partners. Great coffee. I love it. If you've never had Black Rifle, you should check it out as well. But as we dive in, just a couple of this isn't going to be a long book review. I plan to make these fairly short, easily digestible, right? You'll have to excuse me, but I do use my phone for my notes. And so if you see me looking at my phone, I'm not checking out my text messages. I'm just looking at my notes, all right? I'll start with what I expected this book to be and that it was not. Okay, the first expectation that I had of this book was that it was going to be a leadership book, and it was going to be full of poster-worthy, social media-friendly, presentation-oriented one-liners that I could borrow and quote Andy on and use in my presentations, use in potentially in sermons, and so on and so forth. This book is not that. So if you are looking for a leadership book that is full of one-liners, this is not your book. All right. I personally think that is a fantastic thing, and we'll talk about why here in a minute. But if that's what you're looking for from this book, it's not that. It's also not a book full of leadership theory, right? Where the main heading is the leadership theory, and then there's 3 subpoints, and then a clear conclusion, a next step plan for you to execute. That's not this book either. I thoroughly appreciated that because I was kind of expecting that going in, and I was kind of nervous about that going in. I've read a lot of those books. I don't know that I really need to read more of them, but this book was not, and so I'm greatly appreciative of the reality that it did not meet my expectations of the type of book that it was going to be. Also, while Andy Stump is a retired Navy SEAL, and that is his background and his experience. As he shares in the book, he is not defined by that experience. And so if you were looking for some really cool stories from a Navy SEAL and their experience and how they battled through and pushed through, you'll get some of that, but that's not the only thing that's in the book. And so again, that was an expectation that did not get met, and I am incredibly thankful for it. I've read plenty of those books. I love those books. They are motivating to me, right? As a man and as a man who's trying to win in life. But this book was not that. And so don't have that expectation going into it. I certainly did, and it did not meet that expectation. And again, that's something I have to say. Thank you, Andy, for not meeting that expectation. Also, if you don't consider yourself a leader, it's okay. I kind of went into this book with the concept that he was going to say, with the expectation, I should say, that Andy was going to be like, hey, everyone's a leader, you're a leader, believe you're a leader, let's go, right? And that's not what he did. And I could not be more thankful for that either. So again, he did not meet my expectation here. And again, I'm incredibly grateful for that. This book truly is how do you succeed and win in life, right? And so whether you view yourself as a leader or not, the things that he talks about and the principles that he brings out encourage you to recognize that you can win, and it takes you pushing through to win. But that does not mean you have to see yourself in this certain role or capacity. It's just the reality of how do we go through life, right? And so for me, that's incredibly encouraging, because I think, not wrongly, but as a pastor and as a church leader, I think the church culture is even really pushed into this, everyone's a leader, you have to lead, right? And it's similar to what it was 20 years ago, where everyone's a minister, you're a minister. And hey, there's some truth to that, right? Everybody leads in some capacity. But there are plenty of people that are not looking for leadership principles and roles and understandings and theories. There are plenty of people that are just asking the question, how do I make it through today? And how do I make it through tomorrow? And how do I make it through the next week? And I think Drownproof is the book for you. If those are the questions that you're asking, Drownproof 100% is the book for you. All right? So some takeaways, some key things. I'm not going to sit here and review the whole book for you. I'm not going to go chapter by chapter and pull out the little things that I pulled out from each chapter. I'm just going to give you a few takeaways. Again, it's a book review, not a podcast on a book. All right, so I expect you to read the book. I expect you to go find the book and purchase it, digest it, wrestle with it the same. That's what I want you to do. And I'll post in the notes, in the commentary below, where you can find the book. I'll post a link directly to it. I'm not getting any money for it. Andy and his team aren't sending me any money, unless you want to. But really, I think it's valuable. That's how valuable I think it is for you and for us as disciples of Jesus. While it's not expressly Christian, there is a lot that we can learn from it to help us through our day-to-day lives. And those lives lived in faith, and that journey of faith that we have as we follow our Savior, Jesus Christ. So some key takeaways. Instead, what I got from the book, because it didn't meet a lot of my expectations, what it did instead, what it gave me is exactly what I needed in the moment, which was it gave me 8 fireside type chats, man to man, right? It's broken over 8 principles that he brings out, 8 different chapters on those principles. And each chapter kind of felt like we were sitting around the campfire talking, right? Like I had asked a question, like, how do you deal with the overwhelming complexity of the problems that we have to solve? And Andy was like, yeah, I had this one experience in life that kind of really brought this out for me. And this is kind of where I landed as I now reflect and process through that experience. That's what each chapter is like. And so I appreciate that. I'm incredibly grateful for that, because it made it easy to digest. It made it easy to kind of to process through, because it was far more conversational than most leadership books are. And so I didn't feel overwhelmed at the end of the chapter with all of this head knowledge that now I had to bring down to my my heart, so to speak, my soul as I process. But really, it was kind of just a conversation between men, and that was incredibly helpful. And so that's one of my key takeaways from it. The other thing is that he shares throughout the book, based on the principles, he shares different experiences, which are all proof of concepts. And so it's really kind of cool that, again, it's not just this theory that he had. And most of the time he admits freely, I did not realize this when I was going through this experience, right? Like I didn't know this was the principle that I needed as I'm going through this experience. But now looking back on that event, I realized that. And so that's why I'm bringing it to you. And so that was incredibly helpful to kind of go through it and look at real life experience and proof of concept that it wasn't just this, hey, I read this in somebody else's leadership, and they read it in somebody else's leadership, so I'm going to share it because now it's 3 generations of leadership theory. Instead, it was like, nope, this is real. Here's the proof of concept. What is it going to look like in your experience? What's your proof of concept for this idea? And so that was really cool. That was a good takeaway. And then at the end of the day, the one thing I walked away, and the question, the reflection that I walked away with is, how you lead yourself is your mark on life, for you and for those that are around you. And so it's just a constant reminder that as disciples of Jesus, we have a impact on the world around us, intentionally or unintentionally. And like I said, Andy does not, to my knowledge, express himself to be a Christian. but he certainly understands that you have an opportunity to impact the world around you. And as disciples of Jesus, we know that we have an opportunity to impact the world around us. And so how do we take the most of that, right? How do we capitalize the opportunities that God has in front of us, which includes not only our successes, but especially our failures, right? How does everything in between success and failure, how does it all give us an opportunity to impact those around you? And from a Christian perspective, we would say, how does it give us the opportunity to glorify God above all things, which does then impact the world around us? So I'm just going to walk through a couple of key points that I marked in the book as I read. Again, I'm not going to walk through the whole thing. I want you to read the book. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of key phrases here. Here in the chapter that he titles "The Deep End," one of the things he said is, "What I'm saying is that you must find a mechanism for yourself where you can arrive at that place of silence." And what he's talking about there is being able to find a place where you can calm down, you can process, you can think, you can reflect, and you can make sure you're making the right, best next decision, right? So coming into that place of silence, and I think that's something that we lose in this world is we're always looking for the answer. We're always looking for the clear indication that this is where I'm supposed to go. And what I think he brings, especially again from a not Christian perspective, that we can utilize, because it's a principle, it's a truth, right? But we can utilize from a Christian perspective is, I know personally as a disciple of Jesus and as a pastor, too often I'm looking to God to show me, okay, what's the next step? Where do I go? What's the right one? And often I've come to the realization that God is just saying, no, I just need you to pause. I need you to rest in me. I need you to find that place of silence, so to speak, where I'm not twirling all of these things around, but I'm really focused on what God is doing and calling me to in that moment. And more often than not, it's rest and not action. But I prefer action, so I'm constantly seeking that. And God is really saying, hey, slow down, just rest in me. One of the other things that I thought that I wanted to highlight, this is in his long chapter. It's the longest chapter in the book, called Davy Jones' Locker. But he talks about this. He's talking about his role as an instructor with the Navy SEALs training, and the reality of what the instructors are trying to do, right? And they're trying to push the trainees to their limit, so that they can ensure that the trainees have within their spirit, to overcome even when it seems impossible, right? And so he says this, there is no way for me or any other human being to truly hijack your thoughts. Although I'm writing about it in terms that make it seem as if I yanked somebody else's hands off the wheel and replaced them with my own, that isn't the case. It must be allowed. You are required to be a participant. You do not have to let me or anyone else take the wheel. And this concept can be your greatest weakness, or you can weaponize it into your greatest strength. And he's talking about the reality that I think too often, even as disciples of Jesus, we like to play the victim, right? We like to play, oh, it's because of X, Y, and Z, I had to stop, or I had to quit, or I had to give that up, or I had to move on, or I had to react in that way. No, you don't. You don't have to be a jerk just because somebody cut you off in traffic. You don't have to be grumpy and mad at the world because of what the news is telling you. You have a choice to make, right? And Jesus actually speaks to this. Now, I'm a Lutheran pastor, so I understand that God acts in our life first, and then we respond in his grace and mercy and truth, right? So I very much understand that. I'm not saying that action is towards my salvation, but Jesus does call his disciples to an action. He says, follow me. And then a little bit later, he says, a disciple must take up his cross and follow him daily. And so there is this reality that as disciples of Jesus, we also have a choice to make, right? We can choose how we respond to the world and to the events that are taking place around us, to how other people are treating us. We can respond with God's grace and truth, or we can respond with blame and victimhood and all these other things. For me, that was a key piece. Even as I was reading that chapter, I was really struggling with something, and I kind of found myself playing the victim in the moment, with this reality that choice may be, God, I can't do this. You have to do this, God, right? And that's a valid, faithful choice. But the reality is, the only thing, I'm trying to put it into words, that the reality is I am the sum total of the choices that I make. Right? Nobody is making me do these things. Nobody's making me eat this food. Nobody's making me not work out. Nobody's making me stressed. There may be things that are stimulating that, right? There may be stimulus that are feeding that. But I still have the choice to make. I have the choice to how I respond to the situation. It's one of the things I regularly have a conversation with my family about, is, hey, we get to choose whether today is a good day or not. Every day is going to have its struggles. Every day is going to have its stressors, but we get to choose if today is a good day or not. So I appreciated that. And the last one I just want to highlight is, and I appreciated that he brought this out, because too often I feel like it doesn't get, I don't feel like it gets talked about enough, is that nothing comes without a price tag. There is a cost to everything, even winning. And it's in his last chapter called Refining Your Stroke. There is a cost to winning. And it's just the thing that doesn't get talked about enough in our culture, I think, of if you choose that this is the direction you're going to go, have you counted the sacrifice it's going to cost and everything else? So if you want to be a, 7-figure business person, right? Have you considered the cost that it's going to require of your family time, of your mental health, of your emotional health? Have you considered the cost of what it's going to do for you 10 years down the road, right? Jesus even talks about this, right? This is a biblical principle, whether Andy realizes it or not, right? Jesus even said, before you go build that tower, have you decided the cost? Have you thought through what it's going to take of you, right? And I really appreciated that as I finished the book, that was the point that he wanted to end on is, hey, define your success. What does it mean for you to win? But also, when you define that, make sure you ask yourself, am I willing to sacrifice these things over here? Right? So for me, as a disciple of Jesus and as a husband and as a father of 4 children, I want to succeed in life, but my success is not based on my pastoral platform, right? My success is actually based on my household. And that's how I define my success is, does my wife see me as a good husband, a loving husband? Do my kids see me as a good father and a loving father? Do they see me as a faithful disciple of Jesus? Those are my wins in life. And everything else is definitely worth the cost to me for those 3 wins, right? What's your success? What's your win? As a pastor, I have my opinion of what it should be, but what I appreciated out of the book was him drawing to the reality of, hey, everybody has to have a win. You need to define it for you, right? But when you define that, make sure you evaluate, are you willing to sacrifice these other things? Because ultimately you will sacrifice these other things for the sake of the win. And for me, personally, I'm willing to sacrifice my platform as a pastor and as a leader and whatever fame or money or whatever that could potentially bring in our culture today, if it means that my wife and my kids see me as a loving, good husband and father and a faithful disciple of Jesus, I'm willing to sacrifice those things. All right, so again, be sure to grab the book, Drownproof by Andy Stump. Wonderful book. I'll post a link to the Amazon page in the commentary below. And if you like this content, let me know. Follow me on YouTube so that platform can grow, or subscribe, I should say, to my channel on YouTube. And I'll be bringing more book reviews out in the future as well. All right, guys. See you on the flip side.